We were sitting there playing, and I happened to look up and see the dark silhouette of a woman move in between the crack of the hung blankets behind my friend. I thought her mum had come into the room to talk to us. I told my friend, and she suddenly had a fearful expression on her face, and she asked me to turn on the light. So I got up to turn on the light, expecting to see her mum standing in the room. But she wasn't there. The room was empty. Watch this video until the end to hear about the terrifying demonic entity that haunted these two girls as children. I'm your host, Severed Soul. I don't know how many people really believe in ghosts or the paranormal. I would never say I'm some kind of professional psychic or medium. I'm definitely not. I just know I've always been able to see things other people couldn't see, hear things other people couldn't hear, knew things other people didn't know. Pretty much my whole life. I felt like a freak and a weirdo for a really long time, until I realised that this is just part of my life. It's not going away, and I need to accept it. I sought some guidance from psychic mediums and the paranormal community, and it really helped. Just a bit of backstory, but it is important. Now, on with the story. One night, a couple of years ago, I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep. Our house had a long hallway upstairs. My room was at one end of the hallway, and my sister's room was at the other end of the hallway, next to my mum's bedroom. My sister had a friend staying overnight who was dealing with an abusive boyfriend at the time. They were drinking and talking about what she should do about the situation. This will be important later. Have you ever had the feeling that somebody is watching you? Or that feeling when you just know that somebody has stepped into your space? You don't have to look, you just know. Well, that's what I felt. I looked up to see a girl with just her head poking into my room through my slightly open door. I just stared for a second in shock. I didn't recognise this girl at all. She looked a bit shorter than me, probably in her 20s, with long, dark, scruffy hair. I was wondering who she was and what she wanted. At first, she had a very serious, stoic expression on her face, but then she started to smile. But I don't mean a friendly smile. This was sinister. Slowly, her eyes widened, huge and black, and her jaw seemed to unhinge into this unnaturally wide, sick, evil smile. My stomach dropped as I just stared at her for what seemed like a lifetime, frozen in fear. The evil smile soon dissipated. Her expression was once again without any emotion. The girl turned around and skipped down the hallway towards my sister's room. My initial thought was that this entity, spirit, demon, whatever it was attached to my sister's friend. Depression and abuse, all those type of terrible situations can really attract negative energies. So this just made sense to me. I'd like to bring the story forward to last night. It's been a few years, and my parents have since gotten divorced, which is a crazy story in itself. Let's just say I realised that my dad wasn't the only narcissist in our family. My mum absolutely was too. They were a toxic couple to say the least, and I'm now in a situation where I have to live with my mum. It's fine for now. It's free. I'm grateful and I'll deal with it. Last night, I was lying in bed, watching TV, minding my own business. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I got that feeling again. My stomach dropped. It's always that same ominous feeling whenever I'm about to experience something of a paranormal nature. I looked over towards my bedroom door, and lo and behold, it was the same girl that I'd seen a few years before. With my voice trembling, I asked her who she was and what she wanted. She didn't answer. She just smiled again. Only this time, her eyes went white. Completely white. But her mouth grew into that same huge black grin. Only this time, she had tons of teeth. Way too many teeth. This is where a professional medium could figure out the who's, where's, why's and what's. But I'm not that good. I stood up to get my incense, as this seems to drive them out. He turned around and ran down the hall in the direction of my mum's bedroom. What I could see through the crack of my mum's bedroom door was absolutely spine-chilling. This terrifying demon girl was perched on top of my mum, staring at me, much like a predatory animal claiming their prey. It was wild. It was intense, and I've never seen anything so terrifying in all my life, ever. It was in this moment I also realised that this terrifying entity was never attached to my sister's friend. It was attached to my mum, like a parasite, but for how many years? My mum has always exuded an incredibly negative energy, no matter what anybody does to try to help her. She thrives on drama, she's hostile, bitter, and she loves to play the victim. I can only conclude that this entity is drawing its strength from my mum's negativity. I don't feel like she can actually hurt me, but when she's around, it's truly terrifying. She looks and feels absolutely demonic, and I'm sure she thrives from the chaos within our home. So, this takes place back in 2005. I was serving at the US Embassy in the Ivory Coast, West Africa. One morning, after working my night shift at the embassy, I returned home to the Marine house. The US Marines lived in a local residence bought and paid for by the US Embassy. It was a 3-story home in what locals would consider an upscale neighbourhood by Ivorian standards. The home was fairly large and had a pool, gym, laundry room and driver's room all on the first floor. It housed 5 US Marines that were tasked with protecting the US Embassy and its personnel. On the morning in question, I was very tired. I had just arrived in the country and was getting used to the night shift work, which was fueled by energy drinks. I walked up to my room, which was on the 3rd story of the house. It was a relatively medium-sized room with a bathroom attached. There was one large window in the bedroom that was fitted with heavy curtains to keep the sunlight out so we could sleep during the day. I was crashing really hard from all the caffeine. I managed to take my uniform off and climb straight into bed. It wasn't long before I reached that state of mind when you're half asleep, half awake. I believe I was at the point where I just started dreaming, when some sort of 6th sense kicked in and told me, you need to open your eyes. I remember waking up, opening my eyes, and staring at the opposite wall at the foot of my bed. The room was dark, and I was still half asleep as I scanned from the left side of the room to the right. I recall my eyes concentrating on the daylight that was creeping from behind the curtain, shooting down the side of the wall to the corners of my room. As my eyes reached the far right corner, I stopped and focused on a dark spot in the corner of the room. I couldn't make out what it was at first, but the light abruptly stopped before hitting the corner of the room. As I stared at this dark spot, I came to the terrifying realization I was looking at the silhouette of a person. It was tall and thin, and I could just make out the outline of the shoulders and head. My first instinct was that maybe I was dreaming, or maybe this was some kind of pareidolia. But after a few seconds my vision cleared up, and the silhouette was still very much there. As I focused harder on this figure, I realised it wasn't disappearing, and the chilling reality hit me that somebody was standing there. I had a quick flash thought of what the fuck is that? I stared intently at what seemed to be the head of this figure when it appeared to open its eyes. The only reason I knew that this dark figure in the shadows had opened its eyes was because its eyes were glowing red like some kind of warning beacon. In that instant, I was hit with an overwhelming feeling of tightness in my throat and chest. I couldn't breathe. I was clutching my throat and gasping for breath. It felt like the body weight of a person was bearing down on my chest. The tightness around my throat very much felt like somebody was choking me with their bare hands. Still, to this day, I remember the grip it had, and the flash of heat I felt run down the back of my neck, all the way down to my feet. I started to go lightheaded. I was slowly losing consciousness, and I closed my eyes. My arms went limp as they dropped to my side. I couldn't move. I was paralysed. This dark figure was still staring at me with those sinister red eyes, totally motionless. After about 10 seconds of pure panic, I felt this entity release its grip. I drew in as much oxygen as I possibly could, and after a few seconds I regained consciousness and my senses. The figure was gone. As soon as I had the ability to move, my first instinct was to grab my K-bar knife, which was kept on top of my wardrobe. I climbed to my feet and stumbled across the room, ready to confront this thing in my room, whatever it was. For the next couple of minutes, I tore open my curtains and cleared the bedroom and bathroom, repeating to myself, "What the fuck?" over and over again. My room was completely empty. After the initial adrenaline rush had worn off, I went from attack mode to trying to rationalise with myself about what had just happened. Maybe this was just a side effect of the medication I was on. One of the cons of working an African post is that we were ordered to take mefloquine by our command. Mefloquine is an anti-malaria medication. One of the side effects clearly stated there was a possibility of night terrors. Regardless, I just couldn't stay in that room any longer. I ended up falling asleep in the common area with the TV turned on. Fast forward 5 months, and we moved out of that home into a new embassy compound that had just been constructed. Me and some of the other Marines decided to have a movie night, and we watched The Exorcism of Emily Rose. When the film was finished, I walked into the kitchen and ran into Sammy, our butler. Sammy was in charge of doing our laundry and prepping our meals throughout the week. He was a really amazing guy. When he wasn't working for us at the compound, he worked as a priest at a local Catholic church. With that movie fresh in my mind, I asked Sammy if he could perform an exorcism. Sammy responded, "Of course, sir. I do them quite often. Many evil spirits here in the Ivory Coast." Unsure whether or not to take him seriously, I said, "Are you joking, Sammy?" Sammy said, "No, sir. There's plenty of evil here." I went on to ask him, "When we moved here, did you bless this house?" He said, "Yes, of course, sir. This is a very peaceful home." Then he paused for a second. "Not like the old house. Evil resided in those walls." My blood ran cold, and I asked him to explain and elaborate. He responded, the old house was inhabited by 3 demonic spirits. He recalled that one morning while he was doing our laundry in the basement of our old house, he looked into the marine gym and saw 3 shadow figures with glowing red eyes standing side by side. He said he grabbed his crucifix and began to pray before the 3 entities vanished. He then instructed me to go and speak with Joey, one of our Ivorian marine drivers. So that's exactly what I did. Joey was a 49-year-old father of 8 who had worked for 15 years as a driver for the US Embassy Marines. Joey told me that one night, after dropping off one of the Marines, he returned to the driver's room where he tried to get some sleep. He was awakened by something whispering his name. When he opened his eyes, he said there were 2 glowing red eyes staring straight back at him. Before he knew it, he felt like he was being choked. He said he swung his arms wildly, but didn't seem to be able to connect with whatever it was that was choking him. When it finally released him, he ran out of the driver's room, hopped into the armoured suburban marine vehicle, and drove to the US Embassy where he remained for the rest of the night. He never stepped foot in that driver's room ever again. He told me that sometime later our gardener accidentally dug up a juju box in the garden, with bones and voodoo witchcraft trinkets inside. It was his belief that a curse had been placed on the property. As if the story couldn't get any creepier, I headed inside the US Embassy later that day to speak with my gunnery sergeant about some work. Our conversation diverted to what I had just learned about our old house. Gunny had this strange look on his face. He reached up to his logbooks and pulled out an incident reports binder from a few years prior. He pulled out a report filed by a former Marine at the post. He had reported being woken up by an intruder in his room. He was choked almost to the point of unconsciousness. However, as soon as the intruder released their grip, they disappeared into thin air as if they were never there. The Marine was absolutely convinced it had happened, to the point that an official US Embassy report had to be filed. When I asked the gunner where this Marine had been staying, you guessed it, he was staying at our old house, in my room. When I was a child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, I experienced some kind of entity when I was with my best friend. Based on what I now know as an adult, I'm fairly confident that what I experienced was in fact a demon. My very first experience with this entity was when I went to my friend's house for a playdate. The light in her bedroom was off, but the light in the closet was on. So when I walked into her bedroom, the closet was the first place I checked. And there she was, sitting on the ground in the closet, talking as if she was playing with another child. I asked her what she was playing, to which she responded that she wasn't playing at all, but rather talking to her friend in the closet. I remember she had a Barbie poster in that closet, so I asked her if she was pretending to talk to Barbie. She got kind of annoyed with me, and again said no. Then she abruptly stood up, walked out of the closet, turned around to me, and said, "What are you doing in the closet?" It was as if she had no recollection whatsoever of what had just happened. This was extremely strange behaviour for her, because she was generally a really sweet child, and way more thoughtful and caring than the average kid of our age. She was never one to lie or try to hurt someone else's feelings. The next time we encountered this entity was when we were playing in her playroom. There was a bunk bed in there, and we would build a fort by hanging a blanket around the bottom bunk. We would also turn the lights off to create an atmosphere for our game of dolls, or whatever we were playing at the time. The door of the playroom was closed but not locked. We were sitting there playing, and I saw the dark silhouette of a woman move between the crack of the hung blankets behind my friend. I thought that her mum had come into the room to see what we were up to. I told my friend, and she suddenly went very still and had a fearful expression on her face. She asked me to turn on the light. So I got up and turned on the light, expecting her mum to be in the room. But she wasn't. The room was empty. As a child, I thought nothing of it. I flicked on the light as my friend watched from our fort. The very second I turned on the light, the doorknob next to me started turning, completely in one direction, then the other. It was turning quickly and loudly, as if somebody was playing with it. Again, the door wasn't locked, so if anybody was trying to enter the room, they could have. I remember waiting there for a minute, watching this door handle in confusion, wondering why her mum wasn't entering the room. Maybe she was doing this to let us know that she was coming in instead of knocking. But I still found this strange, so while the doorknob was turning, I grabbed it and opened the door. Of course, I'm sure you can gather, there was absolutely nobody on the other side of that door. I went to the closet in the hallway near that room to see if maybe one of my friend's siblings had hidden in there. But, of course, that closet was empty too. When I was looking in that closet, my friend ran out of the playroom and down the L-shaped hallway to her mum's bedroom. I went in after her, listening to her explain to her mum exactly what had just happened. I confirmed that the story was true and she wasn't pretending. Her mum humoured us, but I could tell deep down that she just thought that we were kids pretending to be scared. We also checked, and neither of my friend's siblings were home that day. This was the last experience that I vividly remember, but it's not the end of the story. A couple of years after this happened, my family moved away and I lost touch with my friend. We never really spoke about that incident, half because she didn't want to, and half because other things took precedence in our lives. Fast forward approximately 17 years later, and my friend has moved to the town that I live in. He reached out to me, and we agreed to meet up to have a catch-up. I am pretty direct and straight to the point, so I didn't waste much time in talking to her about what had happened. Through the years, I realised more and more how wild this experience was, and talked to my friends and family about it. I also searched on Google for things like doorknob turning on its own, and never found a logical explanation. Anyway, my friend answered my question with a simple, "Yes, of course I remember that." He said, "I always wanted to talk about it because there were things that you were never aware of, and I wasn't sure if you'd be too scared to hear it." I insisted I'd be fine to talk about it, but what she told me was absolutely spine-chilling. She told me that later that night she was woken up by some kind of growling noise. She told me she looked over to where I was sleeping and saw a shadowy woman with deep red eyes and demonic-looking facial features. She said that this figure was standing next to me, staring at me while I slept. But once this entity had noticed that my friend had woken up, she looked her dead in the eye, put her finger up to her lips, and made a shh sound. She said she never screamed or ran to get her parents because she was absolutely frozen stiff with fear. The woman, ghost, demon, whatever she was, then faded as she turned and walked away. My friend said she then pulled the blanket over her head and tried her best to fall back to sleep. My friend said she saw the entity a few more times, but it was only ever when I stayed over, and she was always too afraid to mention it to me. I moved away soon after, and she never saw that woman again. When her brother moved out to college, she moved into his bedroom in the basement. When she was clearing out his things in the closet, she discovered an Ouija board, so thought that this must have been the cause of the activity. I think that she was worried that this lady had attached to me and followed me out of state, but I never had another experience like that ever again. I would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I was being touched, or maybe I'd see a shadow out of the corner of my eye. But I know it wasn't sleep paralysis, because I was still fully awake and could move whenever I experienced something like this. However, it's been a long time now since I experienced anything paranormal. So, I really hope that's the end of it all. Thanks for listening to my story. That brings this video to an end. I really hope those stories give you nightmares. If you enjoyed the stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Severed Soul.